What's up, ballers? It's Jack here, and we are talking some 2018 NBA prospects, and I'm excited. This is my favorite sport to talk about. This is my favorite, activity, really, when you boil it down, talking about these NBA prospects here. And so what I'm going to do with this video is have a little bit of a slideshow. I want you guys to tune in, but you can open up another tab, go do your homework, whatever, just listen in. I'm going to be running down some guys to watch for this year. This isn't going to be a scouting report. This is just going to be me giving you guys some players to keep an eye on as you work through the season. Maybe if Michigan State's playing, you want to take a look at Jaren Jackson and Miles Bridges for an example. But just to give you guys some ideas of who some of these guys are, put them on your radar. This is my 2018 NBA draft class watch list. Let's get right into it with the big three guys. The only international guy I put on this list for you guys, because he has to be on this list. For talking 2018 NBA draft class, you have to include Luka Doncic. You gotta talk about Michael Porter and Marvin Bagley as the top three prospects heading into this season. Bagley and Porter are the two guys you'll be able to watch at Missouri and Duke, respectively, and they are obviously premier prospects. Porter is extremely polished. They both have great size at around 6'10", 6'11" each, and Bagley is the freak athlete, but they both are special players who should turn out to be great pros once they get to the league, and they're going to be the guys who have all the media attention that Ben Simmons level hype throughout the season for sure. It's just going to be interesting with Michael Porter whether his team will be good enough to keep him in the spotlight throughout the entire season. Depending on what happens with Marvin Bagley and Duke and some of these other things, he could fade a little bit, but he won't fade off of NBA radars, that's for sure. So let's move into the next grouping I have for you guys, which is the Giant 2. We're talking about DeAndre Ayton and Mohamed Bamba. Both these guys stand over 7 feet tall. Ayton, is a freak. I don't know if you guys have seen that video, but at 7 feet tall, he sure seems to have over a 40-inch vertical, which is just absurd. That's unfair. They wouldn't even let you do that in 2K. And then you look at Bamba, who's 7'4", extreme rim protector, moves extremely well, and is going to be playing for a Texas team that I expect to be better this year than it was a year ago. And both of these guys, they have the athleticism, not just the size, to play in today's NBA. That's the key to me, really, because as you guys have seen with the modern 7-footer, they have to be able to switch out onto guards for short stretches of time, and if they can't do that, they're limited to a bench role. Both of these guys have the ability to do that in the NBA, and are the reason why they're projected to go so highly in the draft, and why it wouldn't shock me if one of these two players ends up going ahead of one of those big three guys I mentioned at the top of this video. Now let's move into the two heavy hitters here. I figured it made sense to give them their own category here because they just have so many players, and that's obviously Duke and Kentucky. So when you look at Duke and you look at Kentucky, each year they reload, they don't rebuild, right? And especially Kentucky, they start with a clean sheet of players. Each year it's a new 6 to 7 guys you have to learn. And for a fan, I can understand if that's frustrating, because each season it's like Kentucky has a new team. They may have the same name on the front, but the names on the back are always different. So without further ado, let's break down. Each team has about 6 guys or so that have serious consideration for this year's draft, which is, a reason why they have to be singled out and paired up together, because they just have so much talent that you have to spend time watching these two teams. So we'll go back and forth here. So Duke, as I mentioned earlier, Marvin Bagley, the near 7-footer, is going to play some 3, some 4 for Duke, and is a physical specimen and athlete who reclassified to this class. And we're going to go in order, in approximate order here for each class. So then first up for Kentucky is Kevin Knox, the guy who almost went to Duke but flipped to Kentucky. He gives Kentucky a wing presence that they haven't had in a few years for certain. And at 6'9", with the ability to put the ball on the floor, he has the size to really be a mismatch at his position. Next up for Duke, you look at Grayson Allen, the senior, who is looking to get back in good graces. He needs to prove that he can play with some maturity this season, as well as fit in better with other talents surrounding him. The year he had his most success was the year where they had the least amount of talent surrounding him. It was really just Brandon Ingram. Yes, Luke Kennard was there, but it wasn't the Luke Kennard that we all got to know his sophomore season. His freshman year, he was much more inconsistent, and that was when Allen played the best. Last season, he struggled. He did have injuries, so it's going to be important that he's healthy, but it's up to Grayson to really prove that he could be a consistent player, especially because he's not going to be the leading scorer at the NBA level, so he's going to have to prove he can settle into a role. Next up here for Kentucky, we're going to take a look at Nick Richards, the center who's played in a number of, pickup games this summer with highly touted NBA players, Carmelo Anthony, Kevin Durant, etc. in New York. He has great size. He's a back-to-the-basket type player at the center position. It will be interesting, as I said earlier. It matters if you can switch out, so that's going to be a key to watch with Nick Richards. Can he switch out into smaller guards? But with this Kentucky team, you're going to get a sense of what Nick Richards can do for sure. I don't think the guys, some years they have guys coming back at the front court positions who are just too good and they're going to take up too many minutes. But this year with just Wenyen Gabriel, who I think might be on the radar for some NBA teams for certain, and then Sasha Kaleo-Jones coming back, there really isn't that premier talent returning at the center or power forward position, so there should be minutes for certain for Nick Richards, and that's important because there's a lot of guys in that size window for Kentucky, as we'll get into. Back to Duke here, looking at Trayvon Duval, Duke's first point guard prospect, legitimate point guard prospect in a couple of years now. He's the athletic type point guard who I think is going to be a pest on the defensive end of the court, and is a guy who, if his shot goes down, is going to rocket up draft boards for certain, could end up being a top 10 guy if that shot goes down. Back to Kentucky, we're looking at Hamidou Diallo, the almost half and done prospect for Kentucky, a guy who at 6'6" has a ridiculous, almost 44-inch vertical, and it should be fun to actually watch him play this season. I'd like to see what he does in the transition game. Can he prove he can score in the half court? If he does that, he could really rocket up the draft boards as well. Back to Duke, we got a couple of juniors. We'll pick this up a little bit here. We got Gary Trent Jr. and Wendell Carter Jr. Gary Trent Jr. is a little bit of, he's a strong guard. He's got good size at about 6'5", 215, 220. And it's going to be a question of his fit. With Duval and Allen already there, Trent tends to play better, it seems to me, with the ball in his hands. He's not really a spot-up guy, so I think there's a chance he comes off the bench for this team. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for him. It would allow him some more opportunities, but he won't play nearly as many minutes. So it's going to be a balancing act for him for sure. Carter Jr. is looking to be the first Duke center prospect to come in and have immediate success since Jahlil Okafor, with the recent struggles of Chase Jeter, along with the next guy for Duke, which is Marquise Bolden, who's still on the radar, I would say, but he's really going to need to have a strong performance this year to really cement himself back into the draft picture. Last ups for Kentucky, we're looking at a few guys here. So Jared Vanderbilt is another forward prospect for Kentucky at 6'9". He's going to start the season off with he had foot surgery, and so he's going to be delayed in his debut, but that's going to open up minutes for guys like PJ Washington, who is a well-rounded forward who can play away from the basket, and is also about 6'8", another guy in that similar size range for Kentucky. They're going to be very versatile and have good size. They're going to be a fun team to watch. And lastly, their point guard for the season, Quade Green. He's not as highly touted as these guys with more size, but we've seen Kentucky guards come in who were not highly touted, a la Tyler Ulis, and come in and be able to play right away and prove people wrong about them. One thing about Calipari is the guys he's able to get in at guard aren't always the premier prospects like a John Wall, but they come in and they are better than initially thought. Even a guy like Marquise Teague, who granted didn't pay out in the NBA, was... he was serviceable. He did what they needed to do for that Kentucky championship team, and that ended up with him being a draft pick. And otherwise, he probably wouldn't have been drafted nearly as high if he didn't fill that role for the team and play to his strengths. Now, before I move on in this video, just want to let you guys know about a couple of things that we're doing. So first of all, if you're new to the channel, we are a draft-based channel. We're going to be covering the NBA draft and NFL draft in great detail. Now, two quick other things here. We are on Patreon, so if you want to support the channel, it's $2 a month, guys. Just $2 a month, but just 7 cents a day, and it really helps us keep producing this content. We want to be able to produce as much content as possible. It's just tough right now because we are just college students. And lastly, we have a blog, talkingballblog.com. We have a couple other writers who write on there, all things sports, and we really appreciate it if you go check it out. All right. Now, I just want to say thank you, by the way, to all you ballers who are supporting us. We never thought we'd get to 1,000 subscribers. It's amazing, and I really appreciate all the support we got in the comment section and everywhere else. Now, let's move on with the video here, and we're going to get into some more rapid fire here, guys, because I recognize it's getting long. But, as I said, just tune in, do your homework, whatever. Just listen in to some guys I want you to pay attention to for the 2018 season. So some standout sophomores for you guys. Miles Bridges from Michigan State could have went into the draft last season, but he stayed at Michigan State to come back for his sophomore season and is poised to be a top 10, top 15 pick this season with his elite athleticism and three-point jump shot. Robert Williams, the power forward from Texas A&M, athletic specimen, has the wingspan, and if he can develop his offensive game, become a bit more in tune with that side of the ball, I think then he could as well become a top 10, top 15 type pick. And then next up you have Bruce Brown, one of my favorite players in this draft class from Miami, just a hard-nosed guard, a guy who's got good handles, plays a tremendous defense, and is really a guy who I think, if the hype train doesn't start, which there's a chance that some of these national writers pick up on him, but he's a guy who could fly under the radar and really show some teams or really be drafted a bit higher than people suspect next June. Lastly here, Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga, guy I don't know all that much about, but he's from Japan. He's about 6'8", 230, and he could be the next international talent for Gonzaga. He played really well at the FIBA U19s this summer and is a guy on many radars as of right now. A couple more freshmen, flipping back to the one and done prospects here. Also at Michigan State, you have Jaren Jackson, a back to the basket center, who's going to have to compete with Nick Ward, who played really well for them last season. But I think Jackson for sure is going to be in that rotation, a prominent member in that rotation, and a guy who could be on NBA draft boards depending on how the season goes, but it wouldn't be surprising to me as well if he ends up having to stick around another year. Now, Colin Sexton at Alabama is a guy who I definitely think will come out this year just because of where he is at Alabama, and I think he's going to put himself on the map, play well enough, and as a guard with, he has a great basketball IQ, he passes well, and he just has a great feel to the game. He's a guy who definitely will have some NBA looks. So if you see Alabama playing Kentucky, watch that game, look at Colin Sexton. So some more guys to look for here as we move into some guys who are a little bit more off the beaten path here. Some guys who are, I just really like his players and I think would be worth it for you guys to check out. So Lamar Peters, another guard from the SEC at Mississippi State. He's a great finisher at the rim despite his size at about 6 foot, and he's a heady player. He's a guy who, he at 6 foot again, he doesn't look like much, but he is just one of those guys who you can just see ending up in the league and being a bench scorer, a backup point guard for many years to come. Now, Kansas has a trio of guys who I think are intriguing, but I don't know whether they'll end up being anything special at the NBA level. So you look at LeGerald Vick and Billy Preston. Vick, a junior who has tremendous athleticism at the guard position, and Preston is a freshman who they're going to need to play well at the forward position because they don't have a ton of depth there, but another tremendous athlete. Lastly here from Kansas, you have Svi Mykhailiuk, who is in his last chance to prove that, he's not just potential. Yes, he's still about 20, 21 years old, even though this is his senior season because he came in a couple of years early there. But, the talk with him was always, he's going to be so good, he's going to be so good. Well, now it's his senior year and nothing has happened yet. So, yes, he's still young, but they need to see some production at this point in his career. Now, looking at Mo Wagner from Michigan, a guy who, along with Charles Matthews, who just transferred up to Michigan from Kentucky, are two intriguing prospects, I think, to look at. Wagner because he has got size and skills at about 6'11", and the ability to put the ball on the deck that you don't see. It's not that common. He's just going to need to get stronger again in this season, become a bit more consistent with his defensive rotations and his awareness on that end of the court. Matthews, he has length. He's a good shooter, but he's going to need to prove that he can do it with consistent minutes at Michigan and earn that playing time. Next up here, guys, a guy who I really like watching play, Landry Shamet, point guard from Wichita State. He's got good size at the position at 6'4", extremely intelligent basketball player, a guy who's going to be coming off of injury, though, at the start of the season, so his breakout might be delayed a bit this season. So there's a chance he doesn't end up coming out after his sophomore year, which is the year he'll be in right now. But a guy to keep on your radar for sure. I think he is going to be an NBA player, absolutely, coming out of Wichita State. And he has a chance to be the best guy, better than Ron Baker and Clay Anthony Early for those college basketball Knicks out there. Next guy who I really like as well, arguably more than Landry Shamet, back to Kansas here, is Devontae Graham. I saved him for later on in this video. I don't know why I did that. And thanks for whoever's listening, because this guy, while he's been overshadowed by the one-and-done freshman at Kansas and his backcourt mate, Frank Mason, he's just as talented as Frank Mason, in my opinion. He's such a good defender, on-ball defender. He's a good shooter. He gets his teammates involved, and this season he's going to be the true point guard for this team, and so the pressure will be on him to get the ball distributed to everyone else, frankly, and I think it's going to show up in terms of the fact that he will be noticed more by the national media and by NBA scouts. Quick rapid fire here as we close out this video. A couple more guys I want you guys to pay attention to. Bonzie Colson, 6'5", forward from Notre Dame. Yes, he's extremely undersized, but for some reason it doesn't seem to matter for him. He still averages over 10 rebounds. He's incorporated three-point stroke to his game. He's a bit quirky, but I could see him being a guy who's able to play now because of the way the NBA is played today. You look at Justin Jackson, not the one from North Carolina who left, but the one currently at Maryland. He has good size at about 6'7", 6'8", and could be a modern four-man in the NBA. Then you look at two guys from Louisville. Despite the scandal there, Deng Adele and Brian Bowen, I think Louisville's going to have a bit of a rough season after losing their head coach and several other coaches for that matter. But in terms of NBA potential, if you're flipping around, watch those two guys. I think they have a chance to play at the next level. They both have good size on the wing. Last three guys here for you guys, and we'll wrap this up. Braxton Key from Alabama. If you're watching Colin Sexton, you'll see Braxton Key out there, a guy who played at Oak Hill. And really, I think as he's about 6'9" or so, or wing, and wing forward type player. And he's a good passer. He does just a little bit of everything. He doesn't do anything special, but he's a player who I think could end up being a rotation level player, similar to like a Kyle Anderson type at the NBA level. Not quite as good a passer, but a guy who just does a little bit of everything. Not explosive or anything, but just a solid NBA player. Last two guys, Mikal Bridges, the wing prospect defender from Villanova, a player who could really take a step forward this season without Josh Hart being there, and some more opportunities for him this year. And finally, wrapping this up with Kyle Guy, the explosive guard from Virginia, who, not a lot of people have on their NBA radars, but I think if he explodes this year and without London Parentis, there's going to be a lot more opportunity. If the Virginia offense opens up, there's a chance he moves himself into that fringe first round, early second round talk for the NBA draft this upcoming season. But thanks guys for listening, and I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Give me your comments below. What prospects are you going to be looking for this season? What other videos you want to see done? As always, hit that share button. I really appreciate it. If you do nothing more, that's awesome. But thanks for listening, guys. Peace. I'm out.